Hello, and welcome to another episode of Objective Health. I am Doug. With me are my co hosts, Elliot and Erica.
Hello.
And in the background, on the ones and twos, as usual, is Damien.
Hello.
And unfortunately, Tiff can't be with us today, but we do have a very special guest. We've interviewed him before, and we thought we would bring him on today because we're going to be talking about big tech censorship, and specifically big tech censorship of health news and information. Anybody who's been paying attention in the last little while and is a regular reader of anything like Mercola.com or GreenMedInfo or Natural News or any number of other popular alternative health websites has probably seen them talking about the fact that they are being censored. Rather extensively, actually. So we thought we would bring on a tech expert to walk us through a little bit of this. So we will welcome again Scottie from Scottie's Tech.Info. Welcome, Scottie.
Howdy. Good to be here again.
Yeah. So cool. Yeah, I mean, just from my intro there, there seems to have been a lot of stuff in the last little while coming out. Specifically, I think Zach Vorhies coming out, the Google whistleblower, who was kind of giving solid evidence of what Google's actually doing. I mean, people had been speculating for a long time about re-ranking health sites and having all these other kinds of ways of manipulating access to information. And on this show we're a health show, so we specifically talk about health information. But I mean, they've been the big news is probably like election meddling and doing things to boost certain candidates and de-rank other candidates. I know Tulsi Gabbard has been a victim of that and is suing Google at the moment. But maybe we should just kind of start with what's going on? just, just to be kind of general about it.
Well, let's see. Where should we begin?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I've done a few videos on my Scotty's Tech.Info channel talking about, Google and all this kind of stuff. And it really actually began way the heck back with, I think it was Larry Page doing his PhD thesis. This was back in, Google was founded in like 1998. And, Larry Page does his PhD thesis. It was partially funded by DARPA. And so, Google always had this motto that was, don't be evil, which was actually kind of funny because since Google's inception, like before the company ever went public, you had the involvement of DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. That's a complicated acronym, but DARPA, and a U.S. government institution. So everyone thinks that Google came about because Larry Page and Sergey Brin, and they're these two geniuses and everything, and they created this wonderful search engine. And the truth is actually that, and this is all based on publicly available information. There have been several books by various people written about it. And basically, from its very inception, Google was designed to, hoover up lots of data and collect information on people. And it was all kind of part of this whole total information awareness thing where, it's ostensibly it's because they want to collect information to like advertise better. They just want to sell you like a fancier car or, a printer or whatever. It's like, Edward Bernays and marketing and all that kind of thing. But the involvement of these different agencies, and of course the NSA actually comes in at various points. And so, basically from the get-go, Google was never about a good search engine. It was about how we can grab a bunch of information. Then you kind of fast forward in time, and of course, Google became very powerful. There's it was the book Surveillance Valley, which I think I mentioned last time when I was on your guys' show. That's a very interesting book, Surveillance Valley by Yasha Levine, because he talks about how, in Silicon Valley, how all this stuff has worked over the years and how very little of it was about well, not that it wasn't about innovation, it was about innovation. And, technologies are cool. I mean, the Google search engine itself is pretty awesome. And all the things that Google can do, like Google Maps and all that, it's all very useful. But behind all that, at every step of the way, you had essentially intelligence agencies and government agencies wanting to get their mitts on as much data as possible. Then you eventually get to the whole smartphone craze, and this is actually interesting. It's becoming even more interesting. Initially, of course, you sign up for like a Gmail account, and they part of the agreement is, they say we'll give you 1 gig of storage, and part of the agreement is that you allow all your emails to be scanned, and all they would grab keywords. Anyone who sent you an email, they'd grab that person's email address, they'd keyword search that person's email, and they gathered all this data. Eventually, we started carrying smartphones around with us, and the smartphones, of course, have all these sensors. And then we started getting things like, Siri and Google Assistant, and now we have like the Amazon Echo, and it's even gone so far as now you don't have that little sort of interactive speaker that you can talk to and it answers questions, and of course, it's listening pretty much all the time. But now you're supposed to get, like Amazon security cameras and hook them up to your Wi-Fi network, so you have footage. And there was a recent news article where everyone was up in arms because it turns out that I think it was, I'm not sure if it was Amazon or Apple, I can't remember which one, but one of them, it turns out that there were humans reviewing the footage. So all this stuff is supposed to be private, and of course everyone is up in arms again. Anyway, and then you have smartphones, and smartphones are great because it's also potentially listening to everything you do, and everyone can relate to the whole experience of, you go out to dinner with some friends and you have your smartphone on, and you're not actually using it actively. It's just on, and in standby mode. The screen is off, it's in your pocket, and you're talking about some product or service. And after dinner, you all get home, and suddenly you surf the internet and you start seeing ads for that product. Mm-hmm. So obviously they are actually monitoring, and they're hoovering up a lot of data. And now, of course, the next interesting step is some new smartphones with AI processors, which is kind of interesting because AI processors can do interesting, cool stuff. Like they'd have like smarter autofocus, let's say, or it could like post-process images or video, or there's all kinds of neat stuff you can do with it. But it's kind of curious because it's also something that could be used to run these sort of machine learning algorithms, which is the way that companies like Google and Amazon, that's the way they crunch all this data. Because many people say, well, hang on a minute, there's so much data that there's no way they can process it all. And in fact, they can, because they're using these machine learning algorithms where you have a box and you program the box. It's software, but you program this box with certain inputs and outputs, and you tell it, optimize for blah, like optimize for figuring out what kind of candy people like the best, or whatever. And then it gives a certain output, and that gets fed back in, and it's sort of self-learning, kind of like self-teaching, and it tweaks itself. But of course, first of all, so that technology, which has until this point been only in like Google's warehouses full of servers, now suddenly it could be offloaded onto the smartphone itself. So then they don't have to necessarily process so much data themselves, because your smartphone will be actually spying on you and processing all the data and sifting through it more efficiently. So they're kind of extending the artificial intelligence out into the smartphones themselves. And all that is kind of interesting because it sort of ties directly into this whole censoring of alternative health sites. Because, of course, there was all the stuff with the election and, Trump and blah, blah, blah. And then they say, there's Russian interference in the elections. And there's a lot of kind of a lot of nonsense going on. At the same time, all this spying and all this stuff is occurring, you have a bunch of people basically saying, well, we know what the truth is, and here it is. And then you also have companies like Google, because they've become so powerful, they are now actually saying, well, okay, not only are we going to hoover up all the information and, we control all the information, but, heck, as long as we control the information, let's just start telling people exactly what to think. Mm-hmm. And then you get into, well, nope, sorry, GreenMedInfo and Mercola, they're not okay. And it's interesting because Merkle had one of his many recent articles on this whole problem. He said if you go onto Google and you type Merkle arthritis, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
If you type just arthritis, his articles used to come up because he's kind of an expert on arthritis and these alternative treatments for it and that sort of thing. So if you type just arthritis, he doesn't come up anymore. If you type Merkle arthritis, I think he does come up, but the results are for like his pet site or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a little experiment and I said, well, how about if I go on Yandex, which is, of course, is the Russian Google, the Russian search engine? Because if you use DuckDuckGo, DuckDuckGo is just using Google search results. And I'm pretty sure StartPage does as well. I'm not sure about that. But a lot of these alternative search engines are actually just using Google's search results and sort of filtering out all the privacy violating stuff, supposedly. So I just went to yandex.com and I typed in arthritis. And of course, Merkle was not on the first page, but I typed Merkle arthritis and poof, there was all his stuff. So I recently actually switched entirely from DuckDuckGo to yandex.com. And I'm now using a Russian search engine for the simple reason that it will actually give me the results that I want. And, it's not going to censor things based on what somebody in Washington, D.C. or somebody at Google wants me to see. It's going to give me, relatively, I'll say accurate results, accurate assuming that their system still works by the general rule that, well, if, a billion people do a search and most people click on this link, then that's going to be the most likely one that we should show you.
Right.
So far, it seems to be working pretty well. So, yeah, just a little plug there for a Russian search engine. I'm sure that'll be very popular.
Our video is going to get censored.
It already is.
Well, I have a friend who actually works at Yandex, and so I started thinking about him, and I was like, well, he's a good guy, and he's really smart, so yeah, I'm going to try Yandex. I've been super happy with it since, so.
Well, that's interesting. I'm going to have to give that a go, actually, because I had always wondered about that whole DuckDuckGo thing, because I'm like, well, it's still technically Google. It's just got this like kind of shell on it, and it, like you were saying, supposedly doesn't have all that data hoovering stuff going on. But
it's DuckDuckGo is just kind of a wrapper for Google. So the result, if the Google results are skewed, DuckDuckGo's results will be skewed. And usually, if you type like a search and then you do like space site : and then the name of the site, arthritis space site Merkle.com, then Google will give you only results for that actual website's domain name.
It doesn't work so well though, really. I've tried doing that with SOT before, and it brings up a lot of sites that are not SOT. And SOT is never like the first, few choices. And then it'll bring up French SOT. And it's like, well, no. Clearly I'm not looking for that.
SOT has been subject to a lot of that kind of censorship for a very long time. And it's been going on for, probably about 10 years at least, and longer. And lately it's actually gotten pretty bad where, even if you do sot.net, no, you don't get any results. And it's kind of a problem because there are people out there who are deciding that this is what it's like the masses of people are doing searches and they're clicking on stuff. And instead of simply showing me what everyone else might look at, they're showing me what they think I should look at, which is, and people make the argument and they say, well, yeah, but Google's a private company. And that's true, it is. And so maybe they should be able to show me what they think I should look at, except the problem is that we're not talking about, simply product A versus product B here. We're talking about actual political movements and social movements and even who the president of the United States of America is. And while all these people are saying, evil Russians did this, everyone's pointing the finger at somebody else while simultaneously preventing me from reading articles on Merkle. Well, I mean, maybe the reason that Merkle and Green Med Info are popular is because they actually share information that does actually help people.
Yeah.
Why are you hiding that from me?
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit too Big Brother, I'm afraid.
Well, yeah, and it's kind of like when you look at the Mercola did a pretty good job of actually digging into it, and the top health sites that are coming up in Google searches for health terms are WebMD, Healthline, and there was another one that I forget right now. Anyway, they're all essentially advertising sites that are directing people to pharmaceutical advertisements and pharmaceutical stuff. So it's like they aren't really like it's portrayed as if they're an authoritative voice on health stuff, but of course they're completely skewed to that pharmaceutical aspect of stuff. And Google has a conflict of interest there because it's actually invested in some of these pharmaceutical things, and especially when you start digging into the vaccine thing. Like, I think Google is coming out with the first universal flu vaccine or something along those lines. So it's like, it's such a huge conflict of interest there. And, when you've got all these different companies and it's like, well, go start your own search engine. Well, the fact of the matter is that Google is kind of the gold standard. Facebook, all these other social media companies that have kind of platforms out there, there's no point in being on them really because nobody else is on there. So it's just like there's nobody there. The whole point of a social network is to share things. So it's like there is kind of like a monopoly situation going on there. And when all of those companies kind of have these special interests, conflicts of interest, and are directing people towards particular things, I don't know how to finish that sentence. It's really bad.
Yeah, I've personally noticed it since I've been, say if I've typed something into Google specifically related to some health or some kind of therapy or some alternative medicine, concept, then the first 4 or 5 pages are the typical. Oh, did you lose me?
Yeah, we lost you for a second there.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say, whenever I type anything related to alternative medicine or alternative therapies or anything into Google, then the first 4 or 5 pages will literally just be conventional nonsense, really.
Mm-hmm.
Just sites which claim to debunk these things. Like for instance, Mercola gave an example of when you put in supplements, the Google search engine has actually been rigged so that it doesn't present what the different suggestions for the end of the sentence for what most people have. Have you lost me again?
No, you're still there.
Oh, right. Sorry. For what most people have searched into the engine. Sorry, my internet connection goes down. But essentially, they've rigged it. So supplements are bad. Supplements are nonsense. Supplements don't work. Supplements are dangerous. Right? So it's like very much shaping the thought of the average person. And so if they ever did seek to step outside of the box and look at alternatives, then the first thing that they come across is disinformation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, you have the same thing with, there's, in recent past, there has been a lot of stuff about vaccines as well. Doug mentioned vaccines and that whole thing is just crazy because you can search and what you find is mostly the sort of mainstream view about it. And, I mean, I'm not the kind of person who's going to say, well, vaccines are always evil, period. Because, I can look at, things that happened and I can go, well, in that case, that vaccine, it actually did seem to save lots of people's lives. But then at the same time, I'm going to go, well, hang on a minute, like what's in these vaccines and how well are they tested? And why is it that when I was a child, I got maybe like 4 or 5 shots. And now even babies are being given like 27 shots at once. And you're going like, well, are all of these illnesses suddenly, super prevalent in like the United States and other countries, or where did this come from?
Mm.
But it's difficult to even. I mean, I can understand why people. I hop on Facebook and I see people going, all right, listen up. I'm a registered nurse, and anyone who says vaccines are bad they're retarded and blah blah blah, and it's about saving people's lives. And I kind of see where they're coming from, especially like as a nurse or as a healthcare professional, because they can be good in certain circumstances. But one of the things that sort of the anti-vaxxers are saying is quite simply like, look, why do we need all these shots? And of course, what about all the there's a fancy word, adjuvants, or there's some fancy for all the additives. Oh, okay. But if you try to do a search for that, all you're going to get is mostly mainstream stuff, and it's like everything from health to politics to like literally everything. Suddenly, you're not being shown things that are necessarily the most relevant to you. I mean, like Elliot mentioned supplements. I have a personal friend who she had urinary tract infections for like 11 years. And, her doctor put her on this like low dose of like amoxicillin or something. I forget, some antibiotic. For 11 years she was on it. And so a friend of mine, it's his mother who had this problem. And he says, well, if you take D-Manos, like boom, you're. And she said, no, that's crazy. Well, so she took D-Manos, and 3 days later, her urinary tract infection of 11 years was gone. And that's essentially like, mannose. It's like a type of sugar, I think. And it's technically, it's a supplement. And so here is this poor woman suffering for 11 years from these things. And, even her doctor didn't know. And many doctors don't know these things because, they're only taught, whatever, like mainstream stuff. And so naturally people go onto the internet and, in every case, is it good that people are getting information from the internet? Well, no, because it's not always accurate, or the bigger problem is that they themselves are not actually sifting through the information and kind of doing their own homework. But just the fact that people have to do this, that they have to do their homework, because a lot of these alternative therapies are poo-pooed. I've used like a gajillion alternative therapies in my day, including like, energetic things like Reiki and whatever. And like, I swear by them. Simply because they work. So, but now it's like you can't even. It's like they're forbidding you from even attempting to sift through all the information and come to your own conclusions, because anytime you do a search, they're making it more and more tricky for you to get any information at all, which is the antithesis of what the internet is supposed to be, which is bad.
Yeah. Again, we come back to it's bad.
It's bad.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It's basically, I've seen the word technocracy kind of thrown around lately, and I guess that's a made-up word, but it actually that is kind of what we're starting to see here. It's basically like a complete control of information. It seems like it's right on the horizon, where it's kind of like. When the internet first came around, everybody's like, yay, freedom, this is going to be the savior of humanity. All the information is free, and everybody's going to have all this information and be able to get so smart. And now it kind of seems like they started clamping down on it. With the creation of the internet, it was already, like you were saying, was basically a big data hoovering operation from the get-go. But it kind of seems like it went in a direction that nobody was really expecting. At least us plebes weren't really expecting it, because we did have this kind of. We're gonna be telling our kids about the golden age of the internet, when you could find any information you wanted to. Not now. You can't find it now. Even now, at least you can like sift through search results, or there are ways of kind of finding information. There's different portals that you can go through. But it kind of seems like on the horizon, we're going to get to a point where it's like there's official information and there is illegal, censored information that, whether or not it's illegal, it just won't be accessible.
Yeah, which is actually very funny because, what do we hear in the news all the time about, like, say, China? Well, they have their social credit score system, and it's so evil, and they're controlling information, and they have the Great Firewall of China, and and everyone's so busy looking over at China saying, oh, well, at least it's not that bad over here, that they're not actually, looking in the mirror, realizing that they are either advocating for the exact same thing here, or they're, kind of sitting around as we are going, what's going on here? Because that's not how the internet's supposed to work.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're inundating you with so much useless nonsense that you have the illusion of choice. Like, especially the arthritis thing you were talking about, Scottie, like, okay, you can have this pill or that pill or this, but never anything about diet or lifestyle. It's like 10 pages of the illusion of choice, and then your brain is inundated and you're like, okay, I guess I will not continue to search for that.
Yeah. I thought it was actually pretty interesting when the whole, Jordan Peterson and his daughter Michaela, and they went through this whole thing with, I guess they're still doing it, the whole carnivore diet. And then there was this huge blowback and all these articles and experts coming out and saying, oh, the carnivore diet, it's dangerous, it's horrible. I mean, it was just like this barrage, like it was like a tidal wave of, that's all nonsense, it's dangerous, you're going to kill yourself. Mm-hmm. And you go like, well, what's the actual harm in trying? I mean, unless you have some, pre-existing horrible medical condition or something, on the other hand, you have all these people who are becoming vegans, and there are problems with being a vegan, in many cases. But at the same time, it's not that simple, because, you can't just say, well, carnivore is best for everybody, or, veganism is best for everybody. Because, there are stories of people who, they get some kind of cancer and then they start like juicing everything, and they claim that juicing cured their cancer. Well, maybe it did, because maybe for them they had some severe lack of some vitamins or, whatever, nutrients or whatever. And so maybe it did. And that's a great story. But then, in the long term, are they still going to be healthy? Well, I don't know. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. So it's even kind of crazy, because usually, most of us who are into alternative health, we tend to sort of look at all this information, like I said, and kind of sift through it and consider like all these different possibilities and try things. In many cases, because mainstream treatments simply didn't work. Like in the case of my friend's mom's urinary tract infection, it's like, look, 11 years, that's a long time to be taking, antibiotics for that kind of thing. And then poof, 3 days later, a supplement cures it. And occasionally she has, flare-ups, and so she takes more D-manos, and boom, done. And it's like crazy. And most people are actually, like I say, sifting through information, being careful about it. And yet we're all kind of treated like, kind of like children, like, no, you're not smart enough to do that. And so we'll do it for you. And then they proceed to tell you, obviously, if you think you have a problem, here, take this, new pharmaceutical that's anti-anxiety or antidepressant or something. And it's like, it's crazy. It's bad.
Yeah, it is bad. Yeah, it is. And it's an interesting point, the whole treating us like children. Because, I mean, it is kind of like nanny state on steroids. The whole idea, especially, I saw this a lot in, particularly a couple of years ago, with the whole vaccine debate, the vaxxers versus the anti-vaxxers kind of thing. There was a lot of rhetoric out there that people who weren't doctors didn't have the right to make any kind of, essentially make an informed choice about vaccination. It's like, you're not a doctor, so you can't weigh in on the debate. Or you can't decide for your family whether or not you want them to get vaccinated. It's so contrary to what I would use terms like the spirit of the internet but I keep on thinking back to the fact that you've already like debunked that, Scottie, saying that the internet was just invented to hoover your data. But
not exclusively, because I mean, it did actually start. I mean, email began as like kind of a fun little project. The reason email is so horrible is because it sort of began as this kind of messaging thing with like no security and like no encryption, and anyone could send a mail as anyone else. It was kind of like a fun thing to do, and it evolved into email. And the internet was kind of like a government project and connecting, military computer networks together and blah, blah, blah. And it evolved into this this, what it is today. And along the way, of course, like all these cool tools came up and all these capabilities and this, massive trove of information. I mean, if you have, like, if your computer breaks or if your car breaks and you have to replace some switch, like your rear view mirror control switch in your car, just go on YouTube and type the make and model and year of your car and, rear view mirror switch replacement. And I would bet you a large amount of money that you will find a video on there, or at least a website that tells you exactly how to do it. I mean, that's like phenomenally cool. So it's kind of like they in the background always had these sort of these horrible this horrible inclination to do all the data hoovering and to try and control, but at the same time it sort of exploded into something that they didn't really expect. I don't think any of them really ever envisioned that it would be really as awesome as it is in terms of the ability to share so much information and to have all this information accessible at your fingertips. Literally, if you want to know how to do anything, like if I wanted to build like a wood framed house, and like say I'm living in the US, I want to build a wood frame house with this and that and the other thing, like I can hop on the internet and learn pretty much everything I need to know to do that. If I want to learn any language, there are various resources where I can learn that language. I don't have to pay anything. Well, I have to pay for my internet access and I have to pay for my computer, but so I think a lot of that happened and that was unexpected. And as all of that good stuff sort of exploded, so did the ability to spy and the data hoovering. That also exploded. And I think my theory is that it sort of reached a point where also, politically and socially, things got a little bit too crazy, let's say, where then all of a sudden it was like, okay, stop. Almost like somebody felt like they lost control. And so now they said, okay, well, we've got to like lock all this stuff down and like, start telling people, no, parents do not have the ability to decide for their own children. It's only doctors who can decide. It's only this. And suddenly we find ourselves moving towards the types of repressive societies that we're always poo-pooing, and that we turn on the news and that they're always, poo-pooing that country over there because they're so repressive and their citizens don't have choice and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're seeing right now in our own countries. So I don't think it's not like all bad or all good. It's like these two different parts of the internet kind of evolved at the same time. And for whatever reason, it's like somebody flipped a switch and the crazies just went, okay, this is nuts. Now we have to control everything, which is not going to work.
Yeah.
That's my prediction. It'll be a bumpy road, but I don't think it can possibly work because you can't control everything. You can't control all the information in the universe. It's just not gonna. And already you have like Facebook came out and said, oh, we're gonna have a Libra cryptocurrency. We're gonna, they wanted to create their own money and control it, and everybody said, no, you're not. That's stupid. Like you're not gonna do that. And they're like, okay. Like that was the end of Libra. So. Yeah, I'm not really like optimistic, but I'm also not pessimistic about it. I'm kind of like neutral towards the whole thing and interested to see where it'll go.
If we use China as like an example, have they been like? 'Cause I don't really know much about it. Have they been like really efficient at locking down the information? Like, are there pirates over there? Are there guys like getting secret access to things that is not government sanctioned? Maybe you don't know the answer to that.
It's kind of hard. I mean, it depends on who you ask. Unfortunately, I don't actually have any friends who live in China, so I don't have any sort of insider information like I do with certain other countries that are in the news a lot lately. Various, like videos and articles I've read of people who claim to live there or to have lived there. They say various things. Like some of them say it's like horribly bad and controlled and blah, blah, blah. Some of them say, yeah, like this website is banned, that website is banned, but this one is filtered, that one's filtered. Then, of course, it's a question of, well, what are they filtering? And I don't know. So, I really don't know. I can't really say any degree of authority, So,
well, the reason,
but I would say, like, is it actually any worse than what we're going through here now? I mean, if I want to search for some supplements and it's being effectively censored, Well, then what's the difference between that and, the government of China saying, no, you're not allowed to view, Scotty's Tech.Info because he's an evil rebel. I mean,
Right. No, I'm just wondering because your outlook is kind of on the balance of optimistic, pessimistic. You don't think that the kind of the shutdown of the information, the clampdown, is going to work. And I was just kind of like, well, I was thinking to myself, it kind of seems to have worked in China, but maybe, I don't really know that much about it. That was just where my question was coming from. So,
yeah, well, I think for certain things, this is my guess. For certain things like, say political topics, I'm guessing that's pretty well locked down. But in terms of like supplements, for example, well, probably not, because there's like Chinese medicine, there's all kinds of other stuff. Again, this is a guess, but because of things like Chinese medicine, which is considered alternative medicine in the West, maybe that kind of stuff isn't so locked down. But yeah, I don't know. It's that's difficult to say, really. I probably shouldn't try to say anything more about it, 'cause I don't know.
right.
I'll go to China and find out and let you know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it was interesting because I know like most of our discussion's been about Google so far, but other sites as well have been, censoring information also. Info was talking about at one point they got dropped from MailChimp, which is really just like a batch email sending service.
That was actually very surprising to me, because when I watched the video where he mentions that, I was like, wow, because I run various servers and use different mail sending services, because basically email, as I said earlier, is like a total nightmare. And so in order to ensure deliverability, you use something like MailChimp, because if you have your own server and you try to send your own mails, you get sort of blacklisted instantly because of spammers on similar IP blocks and blah, blah, blah. So of course, everyone, if you send mass mail, like newsletters or daily updates or something, you should use something like MailChimp, because if you don't, it's not going to get delivered. And those guys usually, up until this point, I'd actually never heard of anyone being poo-pooed by them, certainly not just kicked off because they were talking about like alternative medicine stuff. I mean, it's not even I think there were a couple stories about someone was supposedly sending terrorism related newsletters or something, and they the company put the kibosh on them. It wasn't MailChimp, it was another one. That actually surprised me, because it's like, well, who put pressure on MailChimp of all? But then again, maybe nobody put pressure on them. Maybe MailChimp is simply run by an individual or individuals who feel very strongly that alternative medicine is bunk and we should all get our vaccinations and take our antidepressants, and that's it. That's also a possibility. So part of the problem is big tech, but the other part of the problem is sort of the general kind of hysteria that's going on, where you can't actually have a conversation with many people about certain topics because they just get so upset about it. Obviously, say like Trump and Democrats and Republicans, the more political side, that's certainly one. But like vaccines is another. Where if you say like, no, I don't think I'm going to vaccinate my kids, and people start like throwing bottles at your head and stuff. And it's a little bit, and that whole thing is, I think, kind of another symptom of current problems in society, but also sort of aggravated by the techie side. But yeah.
Well, it's interesting with the MailChimp thing too, that it was just the vaccine topic. It wasn't like you were saying supplements or alternative medicines, chiropractor or something. It was actually just the question of the vaccine scheduling. And like you said earlier, Scotty, the difference between, getting 5 vaccines as opposed to 65. So and we've mentioned this before on the show, in the US, like the compliance rate with vaccinations is well over 90%. So it seems like targeting, Green Med Info for sending out, what do they have, like 300,000 people on their mailing list over just that one topic seems really excessive in censorship.
Well, it kind of coincided with like a few other ones too. Like on Pinterest, they started censoring anything. Yeah, I hate to use the word anti-vaxxer because, as Sayer G at Green Med Info was saying, he's like, we're not actually anti-vaccine. Anti-vaccine is basically taking the stance of wanting to be all vaccines to be erased from the planet. They're pro-choice about vaccines. The idea that you should have the freedom to choose your medical interventions. But, anything that wasn't blatantly pro-vaccine was erased from Pinterest. Facebook, I'm pretty sure, did the same thing. So,
yeah, that's the problem. It's not like there's even that many people, it seems, in that kind of community who are like blanket anti-vaccine. It's just pro-choice and it's pro-education and it's in favor of the right to decide your own health choices, right? And if and it's educating and honesty. It's like medical honesty. That's what these people are protesting for again, essentially. But the problem is that with this whole thing that's going on now with Google, it's essentially as though anyone who does not agree 100% with the narrative is somehow a heretic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it should be burned at the stake. Yeah.
For questioning, I mean, it seems like in reading for this topic, it seems like the decision to try and control all the information for people that just have questions, like back to the example that you used, Scottie, of like having a urinary tract infection, or I mean, what was one of the articles we read? It's like 700,000 searches a minute for health related topics. Like, I break out in a rash, what could it be? Just the controlling of all the information that you may get away from alternatives, or whatever they call them, quacks, or it just seems like I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around why that would be such an important thing to control. Why the opportunity to use Western medicine as opposed to alternative medicine is such a need to control the information. It's like one of the articles we were reading is compared it to the book Fahrenheit 451, like book burning and like censoring. And and probably because I've been in the alternative health world for so long, it just seems like common knowledge that you would want two very different sides of a perspective to get an idea of how to navigate forward. Sorry if that didn't make sense.
No, it made sense.
It just seems absurd to me that
I agree. Yeah.
But when there's billions involved, right? You need to block out the other side of the market, essentially. You can't be having those kinds of influences making people ask questions, especially when there's money to be made.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like you get. I mean, it's the same thing with all the kind of. To me, it almost seems like the same as with everything. It's like there's all this money to be made, and then you have lobbying groups in the background, and sometimes maybe let's distract people from this political crisis by having this vaccine crisis over here, and it just seems like you have a relatively small group of people who feel like they're just losing control of whatever. And then, like I say, on the side, they're being approached by, maybe somebody at big tech is being approached by their pharmaceutical company cronies, and they're saying, yeah, you should do something about that, Bob. And then, so, Bob goes and does blah, blah, blah. And suddenly they're censoring things. And also you have, like at Google, especially, apparently they have this whole like wing for like, social justice warrior branch or something where, they all have like green hair and they're all going to like make sure that everything is fair and balanced. And you're going, well, then they probably all shouldn't have pink and green hair because most people don't, and that's not fair and balanced, But it's like, well, so then you have groups like that who are apparently sort of steering things in various directions. So if like one of them gets really upset by, vaccines or something, suddenly you have this whole big explosion. And it's like, it is actually a little bit strange to me. Like it is absurd, and it does actually kind of blow my mind, because I'm continually surprised. Like I said, I'm optimistic and pessimistic, but at the same time, I am still kind of shocked that there hasn't really been enough blowback against all this stuff. Okay, so we have some congressional hearings where they're kind of grilling, Mark Zuckerberg and, Google execs and, blah, blah, blah. But that's happened many times over the decades. And usually there's a whole big stink made about it. And then, companies or, intel agencies or whatever, they promise to not do these things anymore. And then they just sort of outsource it to Britain, and Britain outsources theirs to ours. And we go, yeah, we just carry on as before.
Mm-hmm.
But there is something about like right now where, and like I said, I don't know if it's just because of like hysteria or like it's like something in the air where suddenly all these things are coming up at once. And I don't think that's purely related to just technology. It's like because we have this technology and because there's this thing in the air where people are just kind of losing their minds, that's sort of the means by which they just try to control what everyone else is thinking. And it is pretty absurd, actually. How far will it go? Like, I don't know. I mean, I was actually pretty shocked to learn that, like Green Med Info and Merkla. I mean, come on. How many people have they helped, for crying out loud? I mean, this huge mailing list and all this stuff, and plus, like Doug said, they weren't saying no vaccines ever. They were saying no, we want the choice. And then there's this misunderstanding where the pro-vacciners are saying you're anti-vaccine, and the anti-vaccine are saying no, I'm not anti. I just want to have the choice whether like I or especially my child gets this. And they're like no, and they start punching each other, and it's like it's like the amount of hysteria is crazy, and I think that's just kind of spilling over into the tech world. And unfortunately, many of the people at these big tech companies have decided that, all right, well, we'll just control everything and do it better.
Yeah.
But historically,
for your safety, it's keep you safe.
Yeah, of course. But it's like there's a huge backlash. Like, I mean, if I publish a video on, hey, use this dumb phone, it doesn't run at Google's Android, it runs KaiOS, but it does have little Google apps like YouTube and Google Assistant, but it's not evil apps like on a smartphone. It's different. People just post like crazy, and they're like, no Google, I hate Google, no, nothing Google. And I'm like, good job. So it's so I mean, it's like there is kind of a backlash, but then it's like the big tech, they go like, oh, you're mad that we're like censoring Merkla and Green Med Info? Well, we don't care. We're going to double down and do it even more. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, then people will do like what I did and go, okay, I'll just use Yandex. And they're like, no, that's the evil Russian search engine. And I'm like, yeah, if it shows me the search results that I'm looking for, then who else am I going to use? So, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And the other interesting thing in the, they were talking about whichever video I watched, I can't remember, with Sayerji and Green Med Info, they were talking about Wikipedia and how Wikipedia is now, like, pretty much everyone has known that Wikipedia is not exactly totally above board for a very long time now. So that just kind of highlighted once again how corrupt it's become. But then at the same time, if I go on Wikipedia and I look up something about like electrical engineering, like, power systems or like circuit analysis or, something that's like very kind of engineering, pure science-y kind of things, they have very good information on there because it's not a politically hot topic. It's not a socially hot topic. It's not like vaccines. It's not like a medically hot topic. It's just sort of there. So there is no one in there saying like, no, power is not equal to voltage times current, even though it is, because, my philosophy says no, it's like there is still a lot of good information on there.
Mm-hmm.
But then that just means you have to be very careful, and you have to like sift even more if you decide to use Wikipedia. It's crazy.
Yeah.
That's the theme of this show. It's crazy.
It's crazy. It's bad, and it's crazy. Yeah.
And I don't actually know why I'm optimistic. For a very long time, I was pessimistic, and like I would probably argue that I actually understand more about this stuff than most people. But yeah, and like I see it getting worse and worse every day. So I'm not actually sure why I'm optimistic. But it's like it. I mean, I guess it just seems to me like, how on earth would you censor people like Sayerji and Dr. Merkala and all these people, people who have done so much good for others and who have shared so much, and then you're just going to censor them, and there's not going to be any pushback to that. There's not going to be, and plus it's happening in so many different areas that it just seems like eventually something's gonna snap. When Facebook comes out and says, yeah, we're gonna like start controlling money because everyone's gonna use Libra, and then everyone kind of looks at them like, no, you're not, you're stupid. And then they go, oh, you're right, we're not. That kind of gives me a little bit of hope, like, because at least maybe it'll get worse. Maybe 5 years from now we'll be sitting here and I'll be like, yes, I'm pessimistic now. We're all gonna die. But it's also, I think the core of it is just that all this stuff is happening, and it's like I said earlier, like you cannot control all information. Like every time this has been tried all throughout history, it always, it can get bad. It can get very, very bad in some cases and in some places. But eventually the tide turns back the other way, because if it doesn't, we all destroy ourselves. So I don't know, but and in terms of I mean, I know there are a lot of people who are like, nah, I don't want my stupid smartphone anymore. I don't want Google anymore. I'm sick of Facebook. I'm sick of I'm sick of being on Twitter and being like shouted down by a bunch of crazy people. And I even observed on Facebook the other day, I posted something. I think it was a Greta Thunberg thing, it was like the picture of like her eyes, and I said, like, kind of as a joke, big sister is watching. And a friend of mine, actually one friend of mine from grade school posted, and he said something about like, yeah, because but she'll just find another boat or something, and 4 guys will take her on the boat with 0 emissions, and then they'll get on airplanes and fly back home.
Right. Yeah.
Perfect. Right? And so then another friend of mine from grade school replied to that and posted one of these like, animated GIFs with like the pug and the text triggered at the bottom. And so then they had this back and forth, and this had never happened before. They had this kind of back and forth where the first one who posted said to the triggered guy, said like, oh, well, you're something about, you're like a big man behind the keyboard, or people shouldn't be tough guys behind a keyboard on social media. And then the other one responded and said, well, I don't think you're a tough guy behind the keyboard. And the other one responded and said, no, I wasn't talking about me. And that actually opened the way for a conversation where the nicer one, let's say, the non-triggered one, said, hey, we should meet up for coffee sometime. and it was like, and they agreed to meet for coffee in the end. And it was like, that's not how that's supposed to go. Like, everyone's supposed to be triggered and then start like hurling insults and memes at each other, and then smash their computers with a baseball bat or something. And instead it was like, they're going to meet up for coffee now and just have a chat. More in common than they thought. And you go, oh, well, that's a good idea. That's nice. So I'm seeing like little sort of glimmers of hope here where, both in terms of technology and in terms of like society and you never know how things are going to go, but I wish there was something something that we could do. I suppose we can go to, you know, Merkle and Green.Info and other sites like that and just read them more often, bookmark them, and just keep reading and share them on social media and just keep going, because that would be a shame if they were
if they
off.
Yeah, because I mean the latest Google algorithm the change in the algorithm, Mercola was saying something like he's lost 99% of his traffic or something like that. So I mean, it just shows you how powerful Google is, all these platforms, how incredibly powerful they are. And I think that I would hope to see more and more people starting to shift away from those two alternatives. You know, that's opening a whole other can of worms. We could probably do an entire show about that. But I think the big problem is that, you know, these ones have their power because there is kind of like they came up at the right time, so it's kind of like consensus that that's the one that everybody uses. So for another viable alternative to come up, there would have to be mass migration from these platforms. I would like to see that.
There are other alternatives. I mean, like YouTube is obviously a big one. Like you can't say certain things on YouTube.
Right.
As I discovered, if you give any sort of fair and balanced review of China and what's going on there, if you just say that like if you say anything about like they're not totally evil, then suddenly that video can be demonetized and you're kind of poo-pooed and it gets no views. You know, there's certain things that you can't even use the word drugs, because if you do, it's like they say, oh, sorry, this is demonetized, doesn't follow our guidelines. You know, you do a manual review and then they say, okay, you're back. I mean, it's there's different levels. There's being like, you know, demonetized permanently individual videos. Then there's being like deplatformed, where they just kick you off entirely. But there are alternatives to YouTube, and none of them are, you know, none of them will give creators the exposure that YouTube does, and that's why everyone's with them. And right now, you know, YouTube knows that. But there are other alternatives in the works, and you know, who knows what the next thing will be. I mean, I was just thinking the other day, you know, it's kind of funny because right now video is like the thing. Well, video isn't going to be the thing forever. I don't know what the next thing is going to be, but you know, when you have YouTube and something like 43 years of video are uploaded every single day, you know, you reach a point where it's like, if everyone on Earth is making YouTube videos and uploading them, well, something has to give, you know. And something else will come along and be like the next thing, whatever that is. And that may or may not be controlled by Google and Facebook and Apple and Amazon and whatever. And if it's not, they'll probably buy it.
Right.
But that is kind of problematic, because it gives you all this exposure, but at the same time, there's you know, more and more of this control. Well, the other thing I wanted to say is, you know, when you mentioned that Merkel has said that his traffic is down like 99% or something. That's actually also very interesting, because on sot.net we have lower traffic by about quite a bit, actually, just since like maybe 5 years ago. And part of the reason for that, it seems, is because, you know, we have analytics of various types, and one of the things they say is, oh, you know, Facebook, you're getting like 33% of your traffic from Facebook. But if you go and you actually look at the numbers, they keep telling you that you're still getting 33% of your traffic from social media, in this case, Facebook. But the actual total amount of people that are coming from Facebook is lower. So it's like you're still getting 33% of traffic, you know, the same, you're getting the same percentage of traffic. In other words, Facebook is driving the same percentage of your total traffic to your site as before. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they are not actually penalizing you in any way.
Right.
And it's kind of a problem, because if Facebook decides, well, when people share stuff from, you know, whatever website, we're going to like poo-poo that, and we're not going to let as many people see it, suddenly you get fewer referrals, and you get fewer people clicking over to your site, and then of course your traffic drops. And then they're going, yeah, but we're still giving you 33% of your traffic. We're still sending the same percentage as before. but actually, in terms of sheer numbers, no, they're not.
Mm.
So you have to kind of look at these things very carefully, and there's not really much you can do about it, but you can find other ways to spread the word. If Facebook is censoring you, then okay, we'll try Twitter. And if Twitter is censoring you, okay, well then, keep doing, stuff on YouTube. And if YouTube starts to censor you, well, branch out and use one of the alternative platforms. And, got a 300,000 person mailing list, tell them like, yeah, well, we're using these guys now.
Yeah.
Hop on over, and that could be the thing that actually pushes that alternative platform over the edge, or at least helps to push it over the edge, and suddenly it becomes popular, and boom, it explodes to the next best thing, and then it becomes the best thing.
Yeah.
So,
I've seen a number of YouTube content creators who, like, directly in their video are saying, by the way, go to this other platform and follow me there, like promoting it in that way. And I guess maybe if enough people start doing that, I even saw one guy who was actually saying, look, on this other platform, I've got exclusive content that I'm not posting on YouTube. So go over there and find me there. And I guess if you get, kind of a critical mass of people doing that, you would see at least trickles of people starting to migrate to these other platforms. We post ours on Brighteon, which is natural news. Mike Adams, it's his like alternative to YouTube kind of thing. But the views are not as big over there as they are on YouTube, obviously, just because there's not as large an audience.
I've got to tell people I head on over there.
Yeah, head over to Brighteon. We don't have any exclusive content over there, but maybe we will someday.
Yeah, actually, that's a good idea. To take a page from his book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's very difficult to, in this day and age, you can't, what are you going to do? Post paper flyers everywhere?
Yeah.
Well, okay, that'll work to an extent, but and
a phone tree.
And then you think, well, geez, if you are actually, like, say you have like a YouTube channel and you're trying to grow a business or something, and you are actually getting sort of hits from people and there is interest, to what extent is, to what extent is that actually reduced compared to what it would be, because they're still actually sort of penalizing you. There's so much of the stuff that goes on that, whether it's, social networks, they let you share stuff, but then they sort of kind of censor it in the background. And that's like a really big one, is like, it's not always the best kind of censorship. Is not where they tell you to your face, you're a dork and we're canceling your channel. The best kind is where you're posting content and they are simply not allowing it to propagate or sharing it or putting it in front of other people. And then you just sit there and you think, well, nobody loves me. Like, I'm a big fat loser. And then you give up.
Yeah.
Whereas the truth is that they're doing it in the background because they don't like your content.
Yeah.
And so that's why you should never give up.
Well, I'm wondering if that's why this is particularly happening in the health world with Google. Like, if they just, don't allow the alternatives to be available, then people will just kind of take what they can get, whether it's the drugs or the medical doctor. You know what I'm saying? Like, maybe that's the intention, is if we just control it to the point where people don't have the time and energy to go through 5 or 10 pages of Google searches to find what they're looking for, like a discouraging, because it's also kind of like the average American's attention span too is like not very large, and so if we just put endless nonsense, they'll just get tired with it. And I'll just take the pharma drug. I'll ask my doctor. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So having that tenacity to be committed, and I think that's why the vaccine thing is really one of those top 5 concerns, because they know parents, and I've said this before, don't have hours and hours to read medical journals and really dig to the bottom. So if they just keep, lambasting people that choose to even question safety, then the answer's already been made, the decision's already been made. Well, I don't have to do my research. This doctor says it's safe. This organization, the CDC, Dr. Offit or whatever, you got your 5 people, and that's as far as they go. Because again, like the vaccine thing just seems so bizarre that it would be still going on. I mean, I feel like 6 months ago we did the vaccine thing, and it's still going on. It's still like censorship, and no, it's not letting up.
Maybe everybody will go back to books. You can't find the information you need online on the web, so people will just start reading books again.
But that can even happen in like a library too, where it's you want a book and it's missing, it's out of, they can't find it. So I just think that the internet is like you were saying, Scottie, so extensive. There's just so much, and I wanted to share that I'm with you. I'm optimistic as well. I know I shared this a couple months ago about Monsanto getting sued, and maybe this will eventually happen in the future with vaccine, companies. And my co-host did not share my optimism, but I will continue to stay optimistic.
All right, good job. I mean, it's like what you're saying is true, because I mean, you see it kind of across the board, whether it comes to like politics and countries waging war on other countries and vaccines and, like all this stuff where, I mean, you can say, well, the average American doesn't have the attention span, a long enough attention span. And, it's also the simple fact that, most people they're so buried in their lives. Like it's enough to actually like get up and take care of the kids and then go to, get them to school and then go to work and then get the kids after school and and they barely have time to like breathe. So at the end of the day, like, they're just going to turn on mainstream news or this or that. Or so those of us who, for whatever reason, actually have not just the drive, but the time to talk about this stuff, like, I think it's that much more important that we do. Because I mean, like on my techie channel, I made some videos about, like I said, like dumb phones, and I've talked about like 5G and the health risks of like wireless stuff, like radio frequency emissions and stuff. And when I do that kind of stuff, I feel like, well, I'm probably not going to make any kind of difference. It's probably not going to stop the rollout of 5G. But I'm just going to do it anyway because, I look and I see like literally thousands of studies about this stuff, and I go, this is ridiculous. Like, we've got to stop. And I say point blank, I don't think we should get rid of all of it. I think we should work together and do a real long-term study and figure out how to make it safe. So we don't have to get rid of it. We just have to make it safe. And I think it's possible to do that. And again, I kind of feel like, well, on the one hand, it's like, I have to do this. And on the other hand, it's like, well, why am I bothering? Because nobody's going to care. It's not going to change anything. And in the end, suddenly, like a few months, even years later, suddenly there are entire cities who have stopped the rollout of 5G. They're like, no, we're not going to roll out 5G. There was another story where the first video I did on 5G was like the following month. There was a guy for like PC Magazine, I think it was, who wrote an article, and it wasn't in response to my video or anything. Like, I'm not that important, but it was interesting because my video was one of several videos and news stories at that time. And like a month later, here comes this guy. I think it was PC Magazine. He writes this article. He wasn't even pro 5G. He was like, he kind of wussed out, actually. He didn't really take a stance on it either way. He was just kind of reporting, well, you have these people who say it's good, and you have those people who say it's bad. Bye. Like, that was it. And he lost his job for it.
You're kidding.
Wow.
And they replaced him with another guy who wrote this glowing review of how wonderful 5G is and it's going to save all of our lives and make us millionaires. And like, the guy didn't even say anything. I remember reading the article and I was going like, dude, you should have at least stuck
your neck out enough to make it worth it.
Yeah, like if you're going to take the time to write something, at least, do a little research and, at least spell out your own opinion, like make it worth something. And he couldn't even do that. And then I find out a little while ago that, yeah, he was actually fired because it wasn't a glowing enough review. And like I say, it was replaced by an article by another guy who just said, oh, 5G is so wonderful. So there are also like cities there that are banning stuff. There are petitions that are going on. There are entire Facebook groups that like spring up, and that's just for like one topic, the topic of 5G. And it's the same for like vaccines and all this stuff. And I think that's actually very important because no, we may not actually change the world and it may not turn out exactly the way we want, but there needs to be somebody actually speaking out about this stuff. There needs to be someone saying, if only so that other people out there can hear you saying, no, like that's ridiculous. Like, why are they doing that? That's not right. Or this should be done or whatever. And I think somehow, some way it does actually have an effect greater than we might think. Because like I say, I don't think I'm important enough to have swayed the whole community on like 5G and the dangers of wireless stuff. But I did actually notice that, kind of me adding my voice to the chorus, and it's like you wait a few months and suddenly I'm seeing little blips here and there, and I go, oh, that's surprising. That city like banned it until further review. That's crazy, So I think it's important to just kind of stay on top of these things and just kind of speak out about it and not be afraid, whatever the topic is. And if you know that there's like a site like Merkala or Green.Info that's having a hard time, I don't know Dr. Merkala, I do know Sayerji, and like he's a good guy, and like that actually kind of irritated me because I'm like, the dude, like, why are you censoring him? It's like, that's crazy.
Yeah, Merkola's a dude as well, right? Yeah. Merkola's a great guy. It's like Sayerji. He's just one of those guys who's just helped, millions of people probably just over the decades that they've been doing this. I mean, it's unfathomable the amount of people who they must have helped without any kind of recognition or anything, because, people have just stumbled upon their articles and experienced life-changing effects just by adding in small little changes.
Yeah. And I've been trying to think of like, what can I do to help, Green.Info? Like, I don't know. I haven't come up with anything brilliant yet, but just go read articles and share them more and stuff and see,
Well, sharing our support here on this video for them.
Yeah.
Because I know I've read most of their work since the inception that it started. I always follow both those websites just to see, what new and exciting information they're coming about. And and it's not just one particular thing. It's general overall health and the importance of informed consent. That is your right, your sovereign right to be able to choose what you do with your own body.
Yeah.
Bill, I think we're coming up on our time here. Was there anything anything else that you had wanted to talk about, Scottie?
No, I don't think so. Just that I just think it's important not to be, I get bummed, if you do whatever topic or, when I see this kind of thing happening, or like I post some video and I'm like, God, this thing is like awesome. And it's like, people are going to love it. And it's going to like, blow them away, man. And then like no one watches it. And I'm like, oh, you just have to keep going because, if things do get worse, well, then you just keep going, because what else are you going to do? You like throw yourself out the window or something, So, I think it's just, and I don't know why. I think maybe just because I'm stubborn, I'm like, no, you're not going to take down my favorite medical sites. You're not going to do this, and so I just kind of. Share them more than ever.
Yeah.
That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna start a Twitter account. I don't have a Twitter account. I'm gonna launch a Twitter account. I'm gonna share nothing but Merkelon green netting stuff.
10 million followers.
All of a sudden, Scotty's banned on Twitter. Good thing you tell him what you're doing.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
no, but I think like if you have any sites like that you like, and like always be thinking of like new and better ways to share stuff. Like if you do X, Y, and Z normally, well then add A, B, and C. Like if you don't normally email people links to articles with a little blurb, start doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Because you always think that like, well, this little action won't matter, and very often that's like the little flappy butterfly wing things and crazy things happen. So we just have to sort of keep paying attention to what's going on and keep sharing stuff and fight the power.
Yeah, fight the power. Exactly.
But in a nice
Google.
way.
Kill them with kindness.
Invite them. You know what we need to do? We need to invite Google and Facebook and YouTube people. We need to invite them for coffee.
Oh yeah.
Invite them on your show, and then we'll each have like a big honking American cup of coffee, and we'll be like, we have more things in common. So let's sort it all out. By the time the show is over, we'll have fixed everything, and there you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll be hugging Zuckerberg.
I will not be hugging Zuckerberg. I'll shake his hand.
Okay. Baby steps. All right. Well, I guess that's our show for this week, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to tune in next week for another exciting health topic on the Objective Health Show. Be sure to like and subscribe down below. And thanks so much to Scotty for joining us today. Very good conversation.
For having me.
Okay, guys. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye-bye.